Hey there, REM PCs. Welcome to Rules of Cool, where we interview very special guests, creators, gamers, designers, and world builders. I'm your host, Rem, and today we'll be speaking with returning guest, DJ Bodden, about his writing, his career, and living in Switzerland. Stay tuned because you won't want to miss it. And don't forget, while you're here, to type hashtag REMPC in the chat for your free entry to be entered to win the Starborn Heir, which is book one of the Zach Landstrom series from the Fivefold universe. It's going to be reader's choice of ebook, softcover, or hardcover, Amazon permitting, and it can be yours by typing hashtag REMPC, donating bits, or subscribing. Every 100 bits gets you a bonus entry, and subscribing gets you 7 whole bonus entries. Now, in REM Alternus news, Subversion, the new cyberpunk fantasy TTRPG by Fragging Unicorns Games, is now live on Kickstarter. Build your community and subvert authority at every turn in this gritty Neo-Babylon setting. Follow the project now and get a free map poster with your hardcover book. Exit Vector is the aerial combat minis game coming to Kickstarter March 28th. Give your pilots some much-deserved attention as you use this rules-light game on its own or as part of your cyberpunk role-playing game. Get your rigor on with Exit Vector and follow the link in the chat to check out the project. Don't forget to enter your email. Well of the Worlds is also coming to Kickstarter on April 4th from Mobius Worlds Publishing. Powered by Prowlers and Paragons Ultimate Edition, this TTRPG setting transports characters into a new fantasy world where they discover they have powers they didn't have in their home world. Inspired by Japanese isekai portal fantasy stories, this is a world of adventure for you to explore. Learn more by visiting the link in chat and following the project. And finally, BattleTech is returning to Kickstarter on March 23rd, premiering at Adepticon in Chicago. This new Mercenaries campaign means more minis, more maps, more stretch goals, more fun. Check it out at the link in the chat and don't miss out on the launch. Now, time to get right into our conversation for this week, so stay tuned, REM PCs. Hey everyone, welcome back to the show and welcome back to DJ. How are you doing?
I'm doing awesome because I'm here. How are you?
Oh, yay! Even at 12:30 in the morning in Switzerland time?
Yeah, absolutely. Though I'm a little bit of a night owl, so it's always good to be on my schedule.
Awesome. I'm glad it works out that way. Well, last time we had you on, we talked all about the Fivefold universe, and we had you had to share the spotlight with some other writers, and it was a lot of fun, but I'm very excited to get to know you a little better. So I'm going to start off. We did kind of ask this when we were on the panel, but I want to hear more about it now. So what is your history as a gamer?
So I think gaming for me was always a little bit of, I'm a deep introvert. I was encouraged to read books, so it's not like I just gamed. But gaming was kind of how I brought my brain alive a little bit with that fast twitch stuff. And I remember the first time I really played a video game was when my stepdad brought home his work computer, and it was like a Tandy, and it had an orange and black version of Frogger on it. And I was only ever allowed to play it like twice, and then he stopped bringing the laptop home because I would just monopolize it. But that was the first gaming experience. And I kind of, stuck with it throughout my childhood. My grandmother, who was like this really staunch, nice Irish Catholic lady, became the cool grandmom when she got me an NES. And actually like sent it over from the US. So I was living in Monaco at the time.
Oh, neat.
That made it a little bit hard to get games sometimes, and I had to play with an adapter, but still same cartridges, blowing in them, getting them reset.
I was one of
Um,
those people whenever I would play an NES, like when Mario would jump, I'd jump too.
uh-huh.
Like I couldn't help it.
Yes. It's funny thinking back on the square edges on the controller, right? There were no ergonomics whatsoever. And yet somehow we still managed to sit on those things for hours.
So much, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
So
neat. So from there, what was your gamer journey?
from there, games, and more games. I went Nintendo for a while. I went PC. I played a bunch of fighter games. So like X-Wing, Wing Commander, F-16, Strike Commander, and a whole bunch of others on PC back in the day. And that becomes relevant because I eventually became a military pilot. But on the Nintendo side, that was actually a really big social thing for me and my friends, right? I think starting in mid-grade school and going all the way through today, we would cluster around a Nintendo or a PlayStation or whatever else was going on at the time. We still play Mario Kart with each other. I mean, it's a bunch of 40-year-old guys getting around a console to this day and just talking absolute smack to each other over who can drift. Um, yeah, no, that was a huge part of my childhood. And I think, in terms of an author, one of the first times a story like really just blew my mind was when I played Fallout 1, and I was just like, holy crap, I want to be part of this world. So yeah, it's
Oh,
just been fantastic.
oh, that's so cool. So a lot of video gaming as a kid and reading and stuff like that. So when did you first start writing and storytelling yourself?
Storytelling got me in a lot of trouble. I was raised by a single mom, not a lot of strong male figures in my life. And when you grow up in the French school system, what they start doing is they start winnowing you down into to lanes that you're supposed to stay in pretty young. So by sixth grade, I was in like the international baccalaureate track, and by fourth grade, I was in the scientific section. So I was an egghead, and you're basically supposed to stay in your lane all the way through and work at a desk and do all this stuff. And the very few men that were kind of peripheral in my life had all these cool stories, and a lot of them were in the military. And I just I wanted those stories. I wanted to be able to tell people something interesting that kind of like stopped the conversation. And rewinding the clock, the reason I was raised by a single mom is my father drowned. He was a master diver, and one day he got a cold and he outswam his swim buddy while going turtle hunting, because that's a thing in the Caymans, or at least it was back then. And he drowned. And so 16 years old, I walk into my mom's kitchen and I say, Mom, I'm going to be a Navy SEAL. And she says, over my dead body. Um, so
Oh, mom.
that was the beginning of a conversation. And where we kind of landed was, I was a little bit of a nerd. I hadn't done that many physical things. Like we'd done the standard gym stuff, but I wasn't like a physical phenomenon or anything. So she said, look, you're going to have a really hard time. And I think you should at least try to be an officer, and you need a year of actually preparing for this. Like, this is not just something you're going to get into. And this is not when I first started writing stories, but it is while I was writing stories. I was doing a lot of creative writing at the time. I actually got accused of cheating by one of my classmates' parents, because I sent them home with a story that the teacher like made photocopies of and sent all the kids home, says this is how you should do your essays. And they said I must have copied it from somewhere. Like that didn't really bother me. I took it as a compliment. And so I kept writing in school, in the prep school for the Naval Academy and the Naval Academy itself. I had an English teacher, Doc White, who was just amazing and really wanted me to be an English major. And I didn't really get it. I was just there for the military stuff. So I learned poli-sci. I did a poli-sci major instead. And he said I was wasting my life. So I'm pretty happy that I actually wound up writing stuff in the long run. And I always think to him actually encouraging me to write back in my early college days. But in terms of writing after college, it was pretty much a desert until I was in Afghanistan. And we'd done like a really, really good tour. Like a lot of people will talk about how counterinsurgency, which is when you're nice to people and you make them like you so that they don't shoot at you. Like it's a lot of like hearts and minds and soft stuff, but we actually made it work. So the beginning of our deployment was really sporty, and the end of our deployment was really boring. The new guy showed up 2 weeks early, as one does, and within a week, he said, "Listen, man, I've got it. There's nothing else going on. Just kind of get out of my hair. I want to do this." And I said, "Okay, I'm going to be in my tent." And I grabbed a laptop and I wrote my first book. And it was a dumpster fire, but it was like all those things that I really wanted to see in a story. And I thought, like, this is going to be amazing. And I'm going to just knock this out of the park. And I'm going to be one of those people who wrote a book. And I was super proud of it. And I got back from deployment, and there's all the stuff that comes with that of adjusting back to normal life and saying hello to my wife and kind of getting back to normal. And like I put some money down and I sent the story off to the guy who at the time, I don't know if he's still out there, but he billed himself as Stephen King's first editor, because back in the day, he was one of the first guys who accepted a story from Stephen King in like a local pub. And he sent it back. He was an old school guy. He made you print off the manuscript and you had to ship it to him. And then he would mark it up and send it back. And it came back with more red than black on the page. And I was like, oh no, I don't know how to do this. But kind of unlike a lot of things that I did in my life where kind of I wasn't really great at it, first off, I'd just go off and do something else and find a better use of my time. Like for some reason, I got really stubborn about that one. And I spent 2 years on Elance at the time. I don't even know if that still exists, helping people edit their manuscripts because I couldn't write a book, but gosh darn it, I could tell someone if it sucked. I fell in love with a story that someone is like one of those ebook farms where someone was asking me to review chapters, and like I reviewed the outline for the chapters and I was like, this is actually kind of fun and I could see how this could be better than what you've given me. What would you think of me writing it? And that was Black Fall, the first series of books I put out in 2015.
That's so cool. I love interviews where I can like ask a question and then just sit back and listen and get wrapped up in the story. And I love the stories and the journey you just took us on. That was really great. I was going to say too, there was something that you said. It was about you wanted to join the service so that you could have excellent stories too. So I know I'm going off book here, but
No,
what's your go-to story from that you gained from that? Did you achieve your goal of having the best stories to tell?
I mean, I've got a couple of them. I remember there was this old gunnery sergeant he was like a Korean vet when I was at the Marine Military Academy in Texas. He was about as thin as a twig, 80 years old, and still would get up in the morning and run with us. Just an incredible man. He made a barking sound, kind of in a military motivational kind of way. But you could hear him the school was built on this World War II landing strip, and you could hear him from one end of the runway to the other. He just had this like constant cheerfulness to him, like the world did not touch him. He was like Buddha in fatigues. There was another guy there at the time, Master Gunnery Sergeant Hager. God, he was amazing. He was a Force Recon Marine. He had no knees. They were both replacements because in Vietnam, a Vietnamese sniper blew his knees off with a grenade. Wow. And it was a woman sniper, so equal opportunity in the jungle. And with both legs torn to shreds, he crawled over to her and eventually made it back home. But I remember
Wow.
like this guy was like he must have been in his mid 50s at this point, and the barracks were two deckers, and this guy has replacement knees. But he was so dedicated to like taking care of the kids and making sure that, I mean, the school had something like a 96% college entry rate and 4% joined the service. And he would like drag himself up those stairs by the banister because he wouldn't let part of his responsibility not be walked just because it hurt. Um,
Oh.
at the Naval Academy, I remember one of the senior enlisted there was a guy called Chief Jaco. I'm not going to say what things he used to do, but he was just this enormous guy with like shark eyes, like, black on black. Uh,
Ooh.
and he was there because he'd been injured doing really interesting stuff. And he taught us that, if you're going to throw knives at someone, you should have several, and don't throw the last one. He was also responsible of the period of time when we jumped out of helicopters, and he taught us how to jump out of a helicopter upside down so that as you're sliding down, you can shoot your pistol. Um,
Wow.
yeah, I think I got my stories. I remember us, yeah, go for it.
No, no, I was laughing because yeah, those are some epic stories.
Yeah. So,
That's so
probably the
cool.
most stunning one from my Naval Academy days was I was on a guided missile destroyer. So not on the Marine side. I ended up being a Marine, but I was on a guided missile destroyer in San Diego, and we were doing an ammunition unload for a shoot we were going out on, right? So you'd load the ship full of ammunition, you'd steam off to an island, and you'd do gunnery practice. But I was actually with the gunner's mates. That's where my posting was during the month long I was on ship for that summer. And we'd just gone through stories of how, if one of these exercises goes wrong when you're loading ammo or stuff on the ship, like you can leave a really, really big hole in the port. And by the way, there's nothing left of you or anything within, several
Oh,
hundred. And I remember one of the metal tape around a stack of like 55-inch rounds. So like these are the really big ones. It snapped, and this round like fell off the pallet and cracked. And I remember the feeling of there's like four of us doing this onload, and we all looked at each other, and we looked at the round, and it was visibly cracked. Like the casing is broken. One potato, two potato. Okay, I guess we're all right. And then we got the round off, and we continued the exercise. But fortunately, it was a big enough round that had an arming device on it. But we definitely had a moment. It was like, not only are we going to die, but however it happened, I don't even remember. Everyone else is going to go with us, and this is going to be
wow.
like history. And thankfully, nothing happened. So
Oh gosh.
yeah.
All right. So with that adrenaline story, I'm gonna bring it back to writing and a little more safer space. So I mean, this kind of segues too. You've had quite a career from the research that I did, between start your schooling and now joining the military. And tell us a little bit more about your career since the military.
Yeah, sure. So I got out of the military and decided I would do something, kind of easy and familiar to smooth the transition. I started an entirely new career and became a coffee trader. And my family always jokes about it because it's kind of like a low key joke that I'm a spy. But I went from being in the military and doing a bunch of stuff to working for an export company. But I started in the coffee lab, cupping some really nice coffees and also low grades that you probably don't realize are in your coffee, and thank goodness. There is such a thing as a coffee defect that makes the coffee taste like Band-Aids. If you don't know what a Band-Aid tastes like, next time you have a Band-Aid in your hand, give it a sniff and imagine having a mouthful of that, and that's called phenol. And it's a defect that happens when coffee is processed the wrong way at origin or it gets rained on while it's supposed to be drying. But I did a bunch of fun stuff with coffee. I got to taste a bunch of stuff. I learned to roast. I learned how to calculate like whether a trade deal was profitable or not. And then from there, I went from the company's U.S. office, which was in New York, and there was an opening in Geneva. So basically, the CEO's aide. Yes, coffee can taste like Band-Aids. The CEO's aide was out for several weeks, and so he was dealing with so much stuff that he had a personal aide who helped him deal with family and house and all that stuff, and he had a professional aide who was the person who was out, and the personal aide could not handle the flow of garbage that was just like drowning him and his desk. And up to that point, I had said, hey, you look kind of busy. Do you need an assistant rather than me learning to do something I've never done? And he said, no, 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 learn to be a trader. And so he actually called me up and said, hey, DJ, we're swamped. Can you just come down for 2 weeks and help out? And I said yes, without even like going home to ask my wife or anything. Though I had prepped her beforehand. I'm not a bad husband. I had told her beforehand, I have a feeling one of these days we're going to end up in Europe. So I had prepped her. But I said yes, and he said why? Right? You're in New York. You're learning to be a trader, high speed, low drag, all that stuff. Why would you want to come and be my secretary? And I said, I think I can do more with the role than you think I can. And so I was supposed to be there for 2 weeks. After 2 weeks, we extended for 2 weeks. After that, they gave me a permanent position, and I stayed there for 6 years.
Nice.
I went with him to Uganda. We had an escort of the president's like personal guard. Went to Burundi and Rwanda. Rwanda is amazing. It's like the Monaco of East Africa. Seen Kenya too. Been to Asia. So went to Vietnam. I got to see things from the other side. So the Vietnam War Museum is actually pretty interesting if you ever get the chance to go.
Wow.
Went to Papua New Guinea. By the way, having been to Iraq and Afghanistan, Papua New Guinea is the most dangerous place on earth. It is scary,
Really?
scary, scary. Yes. And I haven't been to Somalia. I understand that's a pretty sporty place too. But the highlands of Papua New Guinea are definitely like a place where I thought, you know what, if I was lost out here without a guide and probably a bodyguard and a car, yeah, I wouldn't make it. It's a very interesting place. There's a lot
Wow.
of tribal culture, like is actually enshrined in their constitution. They have something like 800 local languages, and
Oh, wow.
they're protected by constitutional law from integrating all that. They want to preserve that, and they still fight for fun, village to village, hill to hill. So I remember our escort there. Had a scar in his arm, and the guy I was traveling with said, "Tell him how you got it," and he said it was an arrow, because they still use bows and arrows on each other from time to time. And I said, and the guy said, "That's not even the funniest bit. What do you think of the last war that you were in, where they came down from the hills and attacked the neighboring village?" And he said, "Can't wait for the next one." And this was funny to him. So it's just a very interesting culture, right? Afghanistan
Wow.
was more of an honor-based culture. Like, they didn't necessarily fight to fight, but if you insulted a cousin, like one of their other cousins would come and kill you. In Papua New Guinea, they fought
Very
for fun.
Shakespearean.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. It's definitely Malvolio to the hilt.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's a scary place. Australia, obviously scary for the animals. I remember within 15 minutes of landing in Sydney, I almost walked into a giant golden orb weaver that was as big as my hand and hanging at head level over the sidewalk. And I'm scared of spiders, which is why I became a pilot, not an infantryman. Yeah, no, been to Peru too, and it's just been an interesting run.
I'm gonna
And
need more than an hour with you, because this is epic. Like, I want to ask more, and I'm like, I'm not allowed because time commitments.
well,
Oh, how
I'm
cool.
sure we can do something again in a couple months.
Heck yeah.
But yeah, so I did that for a while. And then what I told my second boss, because I ended up working for the whole C-level in the company. I told my second boss, the head of trading, listen, we can play this two ways. I can create work that I can do forever, or eventually I'm going to work myself out of a job because I fix things. And once they're fixed, I don't want to deal with them anymore. And he said, "Okay, I gotcha. We'll work this on trust." And so around year 6, I started running out of things to actually do. And he said, "What do you think of this tech thing that we're thinking of launching and carving out of the company?" And I said, "Sure." So I became the COO of a tech startup called Farmer Connect. And we did blockchain food traceability from end to end. And I got the chance to work with companies like JM Smucker, Keurig, Dr. Pepper, Massimo Zanetti Beverages. They do Segafredo, if you've ever had those on an airplane. And that's where I am today.
Wow. What a journey. Like you're telling me more and more, and I'm like, okay, so you're like 80, right? Like
Yeah.
it's been a very full life already.
I mean, I'm actually thankful. Like I've got a little bit of the stubble going because when I shave it down, I look about 20 something.
Well, congratulations.
Thanks. It's not always been good, but sometimes it is.
Yeah, right. Well, God, okay. I need to like rein myself in because I want to hear more, and I could talk about Australia nonstop because like I'm fascinated by Australia. But let's go to your series because I do want to
Absolutely.
hear about your stories. So tell us about the Black Year series.
Okay. Well, the long story short of what we talked about in the first 28 minutes of this call is I do believe interesting people write interesting books, right? And so that's the con job I'm going to sell you and convince you that you should read these books. But Black Fall, which is the first book of the Black Year series, is a story about a 16-year-old kid who finds out his parents are vampires. It's kind of a knee-jerk reaction to the era of Twilight. Like I remember reading a decent amount of vampire books when I was a kid, from the vampire Interview with the Vampire series. I remember there was the era of Blade and
My first fandom was Buffy.
oh, there you go. Buffy, and then there's Vampire Diaries, and then we had Twilight, of course, with shiny vampires. Good Lord. I was a big fan of Bram Stoker. Like I actually read that as a kid. I also liked what was the one with Beckinsale? Underworld. There we go. I really liked Underworld.
Okay.
Liked
Yeah.
the gritty telling, Blade, Underworld, and I saw Twilight, and I was like, no, this isn't right. This is not the vampires I grew up with. This is not how a several hundred-year-old being should behave, right? I mean, he's hitting on an 18-year-old. This is kind of creepy and probably not really consensual. So I decided I was going to write a YA vampire story, but with what my understanding of a several hundred-year-old creature should be. With all the hangups of being in Jonas's mother's case, a Hungarian Protestant who saw her father burned at the stake. His father being a French crusader, and the two of them actually met in the Crusades. And having gradually gone through and ended up in kind of a New York agency that's kind of like the Men in Black of this universe. Where vampires aren't as dominant as in Blade. Like they've kept themselves fairly controlled. But they've benefited from economics, right? Interest is compounding. So they're all wealthy, they're all quite powerful. And I really wanted to put an emphasis on mental powers because I know, your classic Dracula has that hypnotic effect on people. So I split them into kind of the vampires into 3 main categories. Some of them were kind of strikers where they're able to move fast or walk on walls or do that kind of stuff. Some of them were kind of mental giants. So if you think of your Knights of the Old Republic, they'd be your counselor, where they can just like punch through your mental defenses and overcome you. And the last kind were puppeteers, and they were kind of like a little bit like if you think of Knights of the Old Republic and Knights of the Old Republic 2, like you remember that screenshot they always showed of the Sith that was controlling like multiple lightsabers with their mind, like that we never really got to see until the final boss. That's the puppeteer, where they're not as strong as the kind of pure DPS brain taker over, but they can control multiple people at once and use them as their kind of meat shields. But they become unstable over time. And so I wrote Black Fall to be all the stuff that I really loved about vampires and werewolves and ghosts and ancient sorcerers. My werewolves have Irish accents. They tell dog jokes. They're extremely legalistic. You're only allowed to have a certain number of werewolves per plots of land. Because they need enough food to sustain themselves, or else they go crazy and start eating humans. So there's an extremely rigid society, but at the same time, they're throwing dog jokes at each other. The vampires have blood flow issues down there. So it's not really, and in fact, Jonas's birth was a complete surprise to both Alice and his mother and father, and it was because they were testing anti-sun meds, and it made them human temporarily. I had an elaborate magical system in it. I built out the history. I had kind of mind castles where they were like attacking each other with their brains. So it is a howling good time. That is exactly the spirit of it. In fact, one of my favorite moments of the series is in the second book, where the ultra responsible like white wolf, who has become Jonas's friend, they're both driving to this town that's gone silent, and they're having this really serious discussion. And it's one of those tense moments between friends where, you know, if you say one more word, you're going to say something that's not going to be fixable. And so they're quiet for a moment, and then Jonas looks over and says, "Go on, you know you want to." And Kieran says, "What?" And he says, "Roll down the window and stick your head out. I won't tell anyone." So the werewolf looks at him, and it's like a little moment where you're like, should I be offended that the vampire is being a racist? And then Kieran, who's led this really like insular life, says, "You know what? I'm going to do it." And he rolls down the window and he sticks his head out. And his first set is like, "Oh my God, this smells amazing." And he's, you know, like tears streaking down his face. The wind is blowing past. He's driving with one hand on the steering wheel, a really serious character. And then the police lights start flashing. So that's the beginning of book 2.
Awesome. Cool. That's a fascinating take and a fascinating world. I like the comedy that's there, because one of the things is a lot of the vampire mythos takes itself too seriously.
Yeah.
Right. And it's like, guys, we're playing in make believe. It doesn't have to be dark and gloomy and broody all the time. But that's really fun. Neat. Okay, so we've got Black Year, and that was your first series, right?
That was my first series.
Okay.
The first one I published, right? Obviously, there was that one that's covered in red ink and that lives in a box forever, and we love it, and that's why I did the Fivefold Universe, but it will never be published.
Amazing. All right, so tell us then, let's go into Viridian Gate Online. What's that?
So I told you when I wrote my first book on deployment, I found out that being a writer actually takes a little bit, and it took me 4 years to get good enough where I thought, yeah, I could put this in front of someone. And actually the dedication to Black Fall is to my wife, because at one point when I was putting short story after short story after short story in front of her, one day she finally lost it, and she said, "I don't give a bleep about your characters." And I looked at her, and this was at a point where I noticed like people were getting tired of me trying to ask them for feedback. And I looked at her, and she looked at me with that kind of cringy look, like, have I said one word too far? And I said, "Thank you." And I read a book on how to make better characters. And again, that's why we talked about before the call, why my secondary characters tend to be so well fleshed out, is because I put so much effort into writing characters that are interesting. So first I found out it's hard to write books. Then I wrote a book, and then I found out that if you don't market your books, they won't sell.
What?
Yeah, it's a crazy thing, but I just didn't think that far, and I didn't want to do it. So I wrote the first three books, the Black Fall, White Winter, and Red Spring, and they weren't selling. And I had a whole bunch of work to do because I was becoming a coffee trader, and just working off out of my mind. And I was about to quit. And there was an author who was also a prior Marine and had started writing around the same time. But he just kind of like, he was a missionary in Thailand living on a dirt floor, and all he had in the house was like a typewriter, and he cranked out his books and he got really serious about it. And he and his wife started a publishing company, and so they did the marketing, and he took off, right, and he was doing well. And I looked at him and I looked at me, and I felt the kind of gut check of, I'm a worthless person and my ideas are stupid and no one wants to read them.
No, it's not
and
imposter syndrome.
Yeah, who would have thunk it? And then like that guy, James, that I just told you about, opened his universe to short story submissions. And I hadn't written anything in months, and I was about to throw the towel in, and I said, you know what? I'm going to do this one just for fun. And so I wrote a short story called A Final Kindness, that took the lit RPG genre, which is writing about people getting stuck in a video game that has stats and character sheets and skills. And that's crunchy with the numbers, right? So the system drives what's possible. I wrote a short story with the intent of breaking everything he had established, but without breaking canon, right? So everything that I could take that there was room to like rotate the camera 90 degrees and show it from a different angle, I did. And people loved it. And then I said, well, great, because I've got 3 books planned. And would you like me to write them? And he said yes.
Oh, cool.
And so the core story is basically, it's a VR MMORPG, so like Sword Art Online
Yep, that's what I was thinking.
Yeah, exactly. It's a game company that's developing this game, and the testers are just like quitting in droves. Like, even the types of people who volunteer for medical research are like dropping out of this trial, because it has a troubling effect on your balance. It makes you feel like you're dying because it's not synchronizing. And so they're going to can the game. And Alan, who has spent 2 years working on this thing, not as a programmer, but as like the HR guy and like assistant to the management, obviously that's a reference to my life. He gets back from the meeting where the kind of Elon Musk or type guy says, we're going to can the game, and sorry, and it's not anyone's fault, but we tried something 2 years too soon or 5 years too soon. He decides to have a cup of vodka amarettos and sneak into the office and just log in and gut it out. And so Alan, being the cerebral guy that he is, he figures out that the game just needs tuning, right? It needs to be tuned until it feels like he's in it, and he needs to believe he's in it. And that was something that I got from James's original series, where, eating the food, participating in the life, touching things, that anchors you in the game. And so your body doesn't freak out that it's having an out-of-body experience. It assumes that the game is real. And so he goes through that, and him and one of the testers kind of tune that in. And then, of course, he decides to go the extra mile and says, not only am I going to log into this thing and not, freak out, I'm going to stay in it for like 48 hours. I'm going to stay in the whole weekend. And when everyone comes back on Monday, I'm going to be a hero. And so it's your standard kind of D&D scenario, except again, Alan is not like a really buff, like gym going guy. He's not a LARPer. He's never held a sword. He grew up in Nice Town. And so the game assigns him the character class of illusionist. And the first skill he learns is how to lie convincingly, and also how to run away and be able to drop past the stamina out limit in return for increasing amounts of pain. So those are his first starting skills, is how to bullshit people and how to run. And so in the process of Alan being Alan, he woos a tavern wench. He plays a card game that we later launched in a Kickstarter. He foils an assassination and then becomes the target of that assassination, and therefore spends a lot of time bullshitting his way out of trouble and running away. He goes through all this stuff and eventually becomes a hero of the Empire, completely by happenstance, with a lot of screaming and doing things that he basically had no choice but to do. There's a lot of humor in it. I wrote that first book, and I actually spent the orcs in this universe are called Risi. And I spent 4 books, and this is absolutely true. I spent 4 books setting up a joke. And that joke is, and you can listen to it if you listen to the sample of the audio on Audible of book 4. I spent 4 books setting up the joke that the Risi, the orcs, when they get really drunk or they get really beat up in a fight, they celebrate by getting a cup full of peanuts and crushing them up with honey, and eating that out of the cup. And then by book 2, I introduced one of these Risi who's like having a glass of milk with it. And Alan says, "Do you want to put chocolate in your milk?" And the Risi says, "No, that'd be weird. What made you think of that?" And Alan says, "Oh, nothing. I guess the world isn't ready for Reese's milk chocolate and peanut butter cup."
Well, that's all the time we have for today, ladies and gentlemen. 15 minutes early, we're going to end because I quit. I'm so disappointed in you right now. Also impressed. I'm really angry about it.
But that's the type of person I am. If you give me something like a Risi, I have to tell the rest of the joke, and I will spend 4 books doing it. In the third book, I had a comedy club where I made fun of all the species, and also used it to kind of score points with Alan's new girlfriend. I have a bathhouse scene because it's Romanesque, not Romanesque, but Roman-esque.
Yeah.
So baths. And I was very descriptive with everything that dangled, was wrinkled, hung over, or so on and so forth. I like to tell jokes. I like to have fun. And I like to really just show off what would really happen under these circumstances and what's the reality of it. So
cool. Oh, that's so cool.
The Illusionist.
Neat. I'm excited about. I have so many books to get, DJ. So many books to get. But I'm excited about them. Although I'm going to boo vocally when I read the Reese joke. So
absolutely.
I'll just send you an email that just says boo, and you'll know when I got there. All right. So I know we only have a few minutes left. So let's kind of, for those who missed your first appearance, can you tell us about the Fivefold Universe series, which, by the way, for our viewers, if you type #RemPC in the chat, we have a giveaway of the Starborn Heir, as DJ is very nicely Vanna Whiting. And that can be yours. And it's your choice of ebook, softcover, or hardcover, which is really cool. So whatever your cup of tea is. So type #RemPC in the chat. Donate some bits to get bonus entries, or subscribe for 7 full bonus entries while DJ tells us about the series.
All right. So after writing 3 and eventually 4 books in the Illusionist series, I showed up in a Zoom call with James and Jeanette, his wife. And I said, "Hey, what do you think of the Illusion series?" He said, "Yeah, it was pretty good. It's like fantastic. I've got a 50-page PowerPoint presentation about why we should start up a new sci-fi fandom." So I pulled it out, and they were a little skeptical at first, and then like they started like getting into it, and then they realized this might actually be a good idea.
To be fair, if anyone was like, "I have a 50-page PowerPoint presentation to show you," I'm immediately turned off. Like, right? You have to win me back real hard after that.
Cool story though. Once when I was in Afghanistan, there was this really, really like career-driven officer who stole my job. He showed up like 6 months after me in the battalion and decided that he had seniority, so he was going to take the top job and give me the crap job. And after me learning how to speak Pashtun and the crap job actually being the most active part of the theater and actually doing quite well, we were going into the last operation of the deployment. And he sent this PowerPoint down that was supposed to be what this final operation was going to be, which is a heliborne insert into an enemy held town. And I looked at it. I looked at the infantry company commander, and I said, "Philippe, is this?" And he said, "I don't know, man. Headquarters just sent it down." And so I spent, we were talking about ADHD superpowers. I spent the next 6 hours putting together a PowerPoint, and it was animated and it was better. So they took the op away from him and gave it to me. And that made me very, very happy. So PowerPoint doesn't always have to be awful. Mine had moving tanks and aircraft on it.
Cool. So next time I need to do a PowerPoint for someone, I'm going to pull you in. Be like, how do I make this not suck?
Absolutely. But the fivefold universe.
Yes.
Long story short, the fivefold universe is born of my love of sci-fi and my failed attempt to write sci-fi in Afghanistan. I finally, after 10 years of writing, felt like I was ready. So I made my 50-page PowerPoint, and where fivefold universe sits is between Star Wars, Star Trek, and Warhammer 40K as the outside layer of the circle. So it's a little bit more sciencey than Star Wars. It's a little bit more gritty than Star Trek. There is an economy. People can be poor. It's a little bit more hopeful than Warhammer. So you can actually win. It's possible. It's not easy, but it's possible. And then the center of the circle is BattleTech, it's Firefly, and it's The Expanse. So that's what you would feel like reading some of these books. The first series, Zach Landstrom, Starborn Heir, is about the guy who's supposed to inherit a planet and instead decides to piss off and become a space pirate. And so after 26 years of being raised by his father, the governor, and being educated by the state, he slips presidential security. He gathers a crew of misfits, including like a mercenary who always takes dangerous jobs and always ends up being the last survivor, so no one wants to work with him anymore. A disbarred cyber doctor who cured a patient who didn't want to be cured and therefore got fired and can't get insurance anymore. An engineer who's like an underworld, made his own Doc Ock extra arms, but is always under the thumb of the local gangs. And this like 3,000-year-old machine that was in the Tears of Perseus. And the group of them get together, they steal a ship and they blast off into space. They run blockades. They get in a fight with the biggest pirate cartel for 24 star systems. He beats that pirate cartel by using market forces and getting into a legal argument with the federal fleet, and eventually takes over the space station.
Awesome.
All the while, there's like the multi-dimensional evil alien dark elf situation. There's star spiders who like bite him and give him like superpowers. It's a rollicking good time. I really enjoyed writing it. I'm going to put more into it, but it's just the beginning, because the Starborn Heir is kind of the story of the immortals within this universe, where it's the idea that survival is not enough. We have to make sure that the people who survive are worth saving. And so Zach, over the course of his books, is going to come up with this concept of the immortals, who are outlying people who go out of their way to help other people and have this disproportionate impact on the universe. So why wouldn't we give those people more resources so they could do more things? And so the fandom that we're eventually going to build, once I have time to write all the books that we want to write, is going to be like, what flavor of immortal are you, right? And you start small, but how do you change the world around you? How do you become the Jedi? How do you become the Mandalorian? And in this case, how do you become your flavor of immortal? And what can you actually take from the book series and apply in your life to make things better?
Cool. Again, ADHD brain got stuck on the very first thing you said, and like it's gonna be a new mantra for me anytime I quit anything or I want to not care anymore, is I'm just gonna piss off and be a space pirate.
Exactly, right? I need bumper stickers.
Me too. I love it.
And we do treat it as a fandom. So, like I said, we have star spiders. We actually hired a Ukrainian composer to score some of the Starborn Air. So, we have this really cool like part of the story that you can read to music, and it actually, as you read at a normal reading pace, it will hit those highs and lows like you're in a movie.
Ooh.
We added extra stories about the characters that you can get via email, like one every couple weeks. Like to get that extra backstory of where these guys started. So we're putting a lot of work into this, and we hope it'll be really cool. We also have a wiki and schematics of ships.
That's so cool. Do you have audiobooks coming?
We do. We've done the first two in audio, so you can get the Starborn Heir and the Voidburn Queen, which kind of wraps up Zach's initial arc from refugee and what do you call someone running from justice, escaped former governor, to being, the owner of a system, a star system. So you can follow that on audio, and it's narrated by Brian Avers.
Cool. Awesome. Awesome. Okay, so gosh, I'm gonna have to have you come back and talk to me more about other things you have going on. And I really want to hear about Switzerland. I'm just fascinated about other countries, clearly, but
The flag is a big plus.
yeah, right. So just as a last, as we wrap up here, where can people follow you to learn more and watch for your work?
My wife Ellie is really strong in the ways of the SEO. So if you just type DJ Bodden into any Google search box, you will find me. I'm on Amazon, which is the link that you've got there, as well as my website. And you can find me on a whole bunch of different channels. I always love to say hi to readers. I'll always love to hear both what you like and what you really didn't like. Sometimes if you tell me if you didn't like something, I might do more of it, if it's the good kind of not like. But, I do pay attention to it.
I hate Reese. That's my feedback. I hate it. And now we'll expect more. Well, thank you so much for being here, DJ. It's just a pleasure talking to you and hearing your stories. Now you don't go anywhere because we will be right back. Don't forget, everyone, that we have a wonderful giveaway of the Starborn Heir, which is book one of the Zach Landstrom series from the Fivefold universe from DJ. And it's reader's choice of ebook, softcover, or hardcover, Amazon permitting. And it can be yours by typing in hashtag RemPC into the chat, or by donating bits and subscribing to the channel. You get bonus entries, so better your chances to win. And coming up next is going to be Emerald Glitch. So if you want some Shadowrun 6th World goodness, please join us, stay tuned, and we'll see you next time, Run PCs. Bye.